Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, non-binary, distinguished guests, welcome to Ridiculous, the Life of a Clown.
Hello, my name is Derique McGee, also known as Lance McGee, and I am a performer, entertainer, circus skill artist, and clown.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
So you've been a clown you started when you were 15.
Yeah.
And you're in your 40s now?
I'm 54. I just turned 54.
Okay. So that is almost 40 years that you've been a clown. That's a long road.
Yeah.
And it's a hell of a commitment to stay with the art form for that long. I mean, so many people who get into what we do do it for a few years or maybe a decade and realize you can't live this way and switch over to primarily teaching or an entirely different field. Now you teach, that's a big part of what you do, but you also still perform constantly.
Yes.
So I guess let's start with how it started for you. What brought you to clown in the first place?
I think the clown was within before I got to the clown stage or the stage of clowning. When I was coming up living in Albany, my mother was going to UC Berkeley, and she was in she was getting her bachelor's in dramatic arts. So I was already studying theater games with her because she was trying stuff on us. And we used to play in the house. We actually used to play who can make the funniest face.
Nice.
So there was, thank you. So there was that sense of playfulness between my mother, being raised by my mother, but there was also that playfulness with my father. Like my father would talk in Donald Duck. And one thing that I learned from him was the Donald Duck sneeze, which I'll do. And I incorporate that in my Hambone act when I do body percussion. So in my family, there was this, especially with my mother, this sense of playfulness, studying the arts. I studied dance. And I was 10 years old when I was in my first play with her at UC Berkeley.
Did you have siblings?
Yeah, my siblings. Yeah, I'm the oldest of three that I grew up with. And we were all influenced. We're all artists. We're all artists in the family. So I think that sense of playfulness and that silliness, I gravitated to that because that was something that I already felt connected to inside, but not knowing until I met a woman that taught clowning in Berkeley when I was 15.
Okay. So let's go with that. Just how did you meet the woman who taught clowning in Berkeley?
Yeah, her name is Arena Isaacson. She doesn't perform anymore, but she's still around. I believe she lives somewhere in Marin. And she worked with an arts organization that my mother worked with. So she was around, and so I met her. And she happened to come over to our place one time when I was about 15 years old. I'm in my bedroom, and I have this plastic cap that women use when they roll their hair up in curlers.
Okay, yeah, I know.
And they put that cap on.
Puffy, big, give room for your hair,
Yeah. I had that thing on my head, and I was pretending to be like a mime robot, like I was getting charged up. So I'm in my room in my own little world just playing. The door was cracked open. She walks by and sees this, and she's like, wow, that's great. I'm a clown. I teach clowning to kids. You should come to my class. And my first thought was, and this is the truth, yeah, right. I don't think I'm a clown because I had this like negative association, like in clowning.
It's so common.
You're right.
And this was let's see, 40 years ago. So,
1978. 1978.
You almost had it. 78.
Yeah.
But even then, we had the negative association was there. I mean, going back to it became mainstreamed in the 50s through television, but I mean, I think that negative association came with it coming to the mainstream, so even that far back.
And add one more component to that, being that I'm African American. What associations with blackface minstrelsy that goes back to the early 1900s, which later in my 20s, when I was going to New College of California here in San Francisco, I did an independent study while I was working with the Pickle Family Circus, and one of my classes, so my training was in circus with the Pickle Family Circus, and I would write papers about what I was learning. I was working with Larry Pizzoni, a little bit of Jeff Hoyle. Bill Irwin was long gone, but I got to meet all these great clowns that influenced me and inspired me. And in my coursework, I had to research blackface minstrels, and that's where I learned about African Americans putting on the blackface mask and degrading themselves, whereas clowns who put on the whiteface mask, it's not necessarily designed in the context of making fun of white culture, but blackface makeup was designed to make fun of black culture. So probably
and you're bringing in like, okay, we're gonna take these pieces of culture that we enjoy and respect, but we can't pay a black man to do that. You know, we can't we can't give that person work. We need to give that to one of our people.
Yeah.
And there's a great deal of indigenous people's clowning that gets wrapped up in Minstralry as well, where they're pulling from all different cultures. But I don't mean to go on with what you were saying.
Yeah. So I think when initially Arena, my first clown teacher, said, you know, you would make a funny clown, I might have already had an unconscious stigma of that buffoonery, that's not, we don't make fun of ourselves, you know, in that way. I suspect that might have been there, because there's an interesting thought like, yeah, right, I don't think I'd be a clown. That's, you know, not for me. And then I took her clown class and I loved it. I was around other kids. I'm 15. The other kids were like 10, 11, and 12. But we were all learning how to juggle, do gymnastics, and do theater games, and how to develop your clown character. We're doing funny walks and movements and slapstick, knockabout comedy. I'm riding unicycles. I was at home, and I've never left.
So how did you transition from 15 in clown class to being part of the Pickles?
Okay, so when I was 18, in Hayward, California, there was a mime program. A woman named Barry Rolfe. She's not around anymore, but she had studied with Marcel Marceau. She began a program, a 2-year mime program. So they were offering mime, tap dance, magic, acting, circus skills class. Letitia Bartlett, who is still around here in San Francisco, she was one of my first circus teachers when I was 18. Nice. And it was Letitia Bartlett that told me about the Pickle Family Circus auditioning for apprentices. I went in audition, I got in, and at the level that I was joining the Pickle Family Circus, I was riding a tall unicycle, juggling on it. I was still developing clowning and juggling, and I could juggle 5 balls, and I was an acrobat. But my skills went to another level once I was working with professionals.
Yeah. Now, is this is post Bill Irwin, but it's still some Jeff Hoyle. Yeah. You said Larry Pizzoni. Yeah. Joan Mencken, this era.
She came. I was with the Pickle Family Circus from 1982, 83, 84. I did 3 years, and then 85 I crossed over and joined Make A Circus for 1 year. And I used to see Joan a lot with Make A Circus and Jeff Raz. He wasn't around as much. He was around, but he wasn't really part of the institution anymore. And Vaudeville Nouveau were around, Danny Mencken, Mark Sackett, Jeff Raz.
And this is before the New Pickles, which was like 85.
Yeah.
When the pickle structure financially kind of collapsed. They had to build it back up.
That's right.
Phoenix, like, while it was on the road, I think. They were on the road when it collapsed. So you went to Make A Circus. Yep. Is that when you first started teaching?
Let's see. With Make A Circus, I was teaching with the Pickle Family Circus during that time because originally our rehearsal studio was on Potrero Hill on Missouri Street and 19th in a big old church that they had rented out for years. That's where what is now called the San Francisco Circus Center, that grew out of the Pickle Family Circus school. So I used to teach there on weekends with Wendy Parkman, Hannah Kahn. And these are folks who are still around, but back in the day, and so we have this history, or herstory. And so I was teaching. So when I joined with Make A Circus, it was a natural ready to perform in their show, and then we would do big workshops afterwards. So I was getting groomed and teaching in big groups. But where I really got my strength in teaching, especially in big groups, was when I started working with Prescott Circus Theater in Oakland with Eileen Moffett, who founded that organization. And that was 22 or 23 years ago when I joined on with Prescott Circus Theater as an artist in residence that I'm still with. And I learned a lot more about teaching, especially with groups, over the years under her direction.
What was? I mean, I've only met Eileen a couple of times in the 12 years that I've been with this community.
Yeah.
What was her connection to circus before the Prescotts?
When I was taking clown classes in Berkeley at 15 years old, Eileen Moffat was in the adult clown classes with Arena Isaacson. Same teacher. We had the same teacher. So we had that history. And so 10 or 15 years later, when I was still in circus and she was working at a school starting up this circus program, she was connecting with Judy Finelli. Judy Finelli was the first artist performer to raise money to support Prescott Circus Theater, and so they had that relationship. So Judy was the first person who sent over, I think, Hannah Khan to go teach. I was like maybe third, fourth, or fifth circus artist to come, but I didn't come through that way. But that's how Eileen and Judy built a relationship of coming together before I was part of that Prescott Circus Theater organization.
So rolling back a little bit, you're 18 when you become an apprentice at the Pickles. When did you first become, what was your first paid gig? What was your first gig where you were being paid to be a professional performer?
Yeah. I actually did some paid shows before I joined Pickles. I was doing a lot of birthday parties in Berkeley because when I was taking classes, I was starting to figure out how to develop my own circus. I had all these ideas. So I had friends who were in the circus class, and we would do birthday parties. I think we did 2. And so I did some paid gigs through that. When I was with the Pickle Family Circus as an apprentice, I was getting free training, so I wasn't paid yet. The following year, I became a company member for the next 2 years, and then I was a paid circus artist performer. When I moved on with Make A Circus, I was a paid artist also. At that point with Make A Circus, I was really trying to find my way as an individual solo act. How do I express myself, just me, and hold that space, command that stage in some way for 30 minutes, 45 minutes? I had this interest of developing my own show. That was happening around the time when there was the very first new vaudeville festival that happened at San Francisco State University that Jeff Raz and a few other people were a part of promoting and producing it. That was an outlet for me to do a solo show in that venue. So around that time, I was getting brought in to do solos with other artists. I remember meeting Avner the Eccentric. He performed at that. Bill Irwin came and performed at that. So these were stepping stones for me to express myself in the context of clowning, doing the Hambone, doing eccentric dance. And when I was around that time in my early 20s, I loved the Nicholas Brothers tap dancers doing eccentric acrobatic tap. I loved watching Fred Astaire. I watched a lot of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. So all those influences. But what intrigued me most was seeing African American men doing these skills who came out of vaudeville, and I was trying to emulate that. So my character persona always kind of had this kind of a classiness but silly integration, and I was trying to emulate what I was seeing with that kind of tuxedo look, but still funny with polka dots. And those were all influences in my clowning of who I go to refer to as Unique Derique when I do shows now.
One of the things that I regret the most about the time I spent at the Clown Conservatory was that we didn't get to focus on eccentric dance. I mean, that was something that I was really super interested in, and we didn't get a lot of focus on. Let's talk a little bit about body percussion and Hambone.
Hambone. Where you been? Around the world and back again. Hambone. Now, Hambone is an African-American art form that originated and was created during slavery times when enslaved Africans brought from Ghana, West Africa, forced into slavery, were not allowed to play drums throughout the Americas, North America, Central America, and South America. Those warrior drummers still felt something inside. What I'm talking about is resilience and perseverance and holding on to something that's within, that you can't break that spirit when a person finds their truth and how to express themselves as a creative artist. Those warrior drummers who didn't have the drums to play, but something inside of them, that beat, whatever that was that drove them to play drums in the first place, reconnected with the body in the Americas, in the South. And there was a dance called Patin Juba before Hambone. And Patin Juba was a rhythm step that you do with your right leg kind of bouncing back and forth in a dancing motion. So you're actually lifting up, lifting down, lifting up, lifting down in a dance motion and patting your thigh. And that's called Patin Juba. Out of Patin Juba, over time, somebody else was exploring new ways of playing the body drum and doing less of the Patin Juba, but start doing more of the what's called Hambone. And Hambone gets its name from enslaved African families on the plantations who had limited resources. And that's what Hambone speaks to, limited resources, working with taking nothing, creating something. The drum being taken away, reinventing, going back to the body. Well, I'll play rhythms with my body. Hambone gets its name from the food, from the ham hock. When white slave masters didn't give enslaved Africans the best part of the meat, the food, the beef, they would get the leftovers. They'd get a big old bone with a little bit of meat on it. You didn't get that prime pig or prime cow. And so what enslaved Africans would do, being very resourceful, well, I'm going to take this bone with a little bit of gristle on it, and I'm going to make me a big old pot of soup. I can work with water. I can add potatoes, celery, onion, some spices, things that I remember that my grandmother did back in Africa with soup. I'm going to reinvent that now. And I'm going to take this pot of soup and I'm going to share it with another enslaved family on the plantation who doesn't have very much. That family would take that pot of soup, eat it, add more water to it, because bone has a lot of flavor in it. So you can make another batch from the liquid. Add more liquid, add more spices. So you can stretch the food, taking nothing, creating something. And that family would pass it to another family on the plantation. And next thing you know, that same pot of soup had traveled from home to home in a big circular formation environment and came back to the family who originally made that pot of soup. And so when people would do Hambone, honoring taking nothing and creating something, the song was created. Hambone, Hambone, where you been? And then you would pat your thighs and create a rhythm. And then you would say, around the world and back again. And what that around the world and back again is really saying, I've been around my community, sharing my limited resources and working together. So Hambone is broader than just actually playing it. It was about being resourceful and taking nothing and creating something beautiful out of it and surviving.
Community.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what brought you, I mean, you talked about eccentric dance, watching these vaudeville players. What brought you to body percussion and Hambone?
Yeah. When I was 15, see, a lot happened when I was 15. I was groomed for a few years with my mom at home and being in some plays, but when I met my clown teacher, Arena, I was learning to juggle. At that time, I played drums, and I had a drum kit. This is in Berkeley, California, 8th Street in Bancroft. In our apartment, I had a drum kit in the living room, and I used to turn on Earth, Wind & Fire, blast their music, and I would try and imitate what the drummer was doing and learn how to play these rhythms. Well, one day when I'm finishing up and going outside, I see 3 kids about the age of 10. They're jamming, playing their bodies. I didn't know it was called Hambone, but they're doing this rhythm stuff. I'll try and get it on the mic. I saw them playing their bodies like that, and already being a percussionist, a drummer, I thought, oh my God, I got to learn how to do this. They taught me, and thank you for teaching me and passing that on to me, because I've been doing it ever since. So that's how I learned Hambone. And then over the years, I started figuring out different ways of playing Hambone, just kind of like a drummer would do. Then when you play drums, you start figuring out other different syncopated rhythms by exploring it, and figuring out what you can do with the right and the left and the foot at the same time. So I'm able to do different percussive rhythms in the traditional Hambone sense, but also take it out of the traditional Hambone sense and play my body like a drum, and just incorporating traditional Hambone rhythms and basic beats, 4 counts.
Well, you've done a great deal much like clown, this could be an art form or a style that just dies and fades away and no one hears from it again. You've done a great deal to keep it current within your own community by teaching, generation after generation of children about this. And I've seen kids that you've taught do this as performance as part of Circus Bella, for instance. His name's not Marcello. What's his name?
Di Marcello.
Di Marcello, not Marcello. Di Marcello. I was close. I was really close. And he's amazing as well. You have either opened for or performed with some luminaries. Bobby McFerrin, Sammy Davis Jr., Lou Rawls. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. Let's see. I'll start with Bobby McFerrin. He was one of the first big names that Bobby McFerrin and his family lived here in San Francisco, and I was living here in San Francisco when I was during the time that I was working with the Pickle Family Circus. A few years later, the Noe Valley Ministry over in Noe Valley would book performances. I got booked with a performance with Bobby McFerrin, and back in those times, this is around 1982, 83, and Bobby would scat, and I would hat juggle, and we would just play off of each other. And I had a couple of those performances with him. First nights during the holiday season, I remember doing it again with him. That was really fun to play with him in that way. With Sammy Davis Jr. back in 1986 or 87, in Oakland, California, at the Paramount Theater, there was an event called the Black Filmmakers Hall of Fame Awards Ceremony. And what this organization would do is bring artists from Los Angeles and acknowledge them and give them an award. One year they brought up Sammy Davis Jr., and I was one of 2 acts honoring him before he received his award. I did Hambone in that act. I had a piano player. I came out of a trunk, and I did this whole vaudeville shtick, right? After my performance, I go backstage, and the late great Sammy Davis Jr., he comes up to me and he says, I'll try and do Sammy Davis Jr. "Hey man, I really dug your act. You were one cool dude, you dig?" He didn't really sound like that, but I have fun with trying to impersonate Sammy Davis Jr. He basically came up to me and said, hey, I really enjoyed your act, shook my hand, and gave me a great compliment that I'll always carry with me. And so that's how I got to be one of the opening acts for Sammy Davis Jr. For Lou Rawls, I was traveling the country I had an agent back in Michigan, and I was doing the college circuit. I was doing a full-hour show in colleges. And
what kind of show?
Doing my full Hambone, juggling, unicycle, traveling with my big trunk scooting out on stage, coming out and just doing all circus. Okay. And there was one year that I got to meet Lou Rawls. Actually, I was going to open for Ray Charles. Ray Charles at the last minute pulled out for whatever reason. Lou Rawls was invited to perform. I was the opening act, and after I did my opening act, he came up to me and said, "Hey man, I enjoyed your act, and give me your manager's number. I got some ideas." And shortly after that, he brought me to Las Vegas for 2 weeks.
Oh, that's great.
To open for him. And what I recognized that was beautiful about that he was really trying to expose me on a bigger audience. And one thing that Lou Rawls would always say backstage, he'd say, "Yeah, buddy, ain't nothing to it but to do it." I say that all the time. I say, "Yeah, buddy, ain't nothing to it but to do it." And some other things I say, like, "In it to win it." So there's very positive, upbeat, language that I use for myself that just kind of keeps me going. And so that's how those experiences unfolded.
So, not so long ago, you were looking at not doing clown anymore and focusing on psychology?
Yeah, I went back to school and got my master's in clinical psychology. I'm a drama therapist, and I have a mindfulness practice. So my day job now is I work at a middle school in East Oakland, and I didn't pursue my licensure, but I developed more as a mindfulness practitioner, and so I'm called a wellness consultant, and I work at a middle school in East Oakland supporting teachers on their wellness and self-care, because the teachers are dealing. Wow. So I have a really nice office that's very like Oasis. You come in there, it got meditation chairs, it got water fountain, the sound of water trickling, and they come in and check in, and I support them on their wellness and how to use some mindfulness when they're getting irritated with students. Sometimes we do a mindful moment meditation just to quiet their mind and just regulate the body system. So that's what I do, supporting teachers, and I love it. So I get to do this healing work and the humor work, which also can be healing and cathartic. So I feel like I'm playing out happy and sorrow in two different ways.
I did a year recently at a middle school as a teacher's assistant working in SPED, and it was horrible.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. It was administratively horrible.
Okay.
Most of the teachers are okay. And the unions are weird here, where there are a lot of people in the same union who maybe shouldn't be in the same union.
Okay.
Like we were wrapped in the same union as the teachers, so if we had issues with the teachers, they were going to side with the teachers because the teachers are where the bread and butter is. It was weird.
Okay.
And it really kind of warped my feeling about middle school kids a little bit, where I love working pre-K through my clown is adult. The clowning that I do is adult oriented. It used to be more kid oriented, but I work with kids on a daily basis, and I love the shtick that I get to do with them, and I love working with kids. The littler the better. But when you get around high school, I thought it was high school, now I realize it's middle school. High school, they're starting to become adults, and so they can be okay again. But in middle school, so much of it is just about setting one another off and driving each other up and seeing how far you can test your limits and your boundaries, and it makes it hard. I mean, it is a difficult job to work with kids in that age range.
Yeah, that age group of youth are going through developmentally a lot of peer pressure, hormones. Their bodies are changing. They're old enough, like mom and dad, I don't need you to watch over me so much anymore. They're trying to find their way and develop community. So it has its challenges.
That's about when I left home. I left home at 14, 15. When you were on the drums, I was looking for a place to live. But so you're doing the wellness consulting, but you're still performing kind of full time as well.
Part of the performing, when I went back to school to be a psychotherapist, drama therapist, and mindfulness practitioner, I thought I was going to shift out. So I was off the grid from performing for a few years, but it was eating me up. I was like, man, I gotta perform. I need to laugh at the silly and have the silly laugh with me, and I need to hear people laughing and having fun and be in that playful, spirited space. So I got back into setting up shows, and 4 years ago I created my show called Fool La La that I'm doing for the holidays at the Marsh Berkeley. Every year that show changes, but what I wanted to say was that by performing, it's part of my self-care.
Yeah,
it's part of my self-care. And so, I could run, but I can't hide. And so I do both. As long as I have the energy for it. In the summertime, I do a lot of outdoor stuff. And then in between, I'll get, some birthday parties here and there. And then I have this one-man show coming up, Fool La La.
You've been doing the Yerba Buena Gardens Festival since the 90s, yeah?
Yeah, my kids used to perform with me. In that, doing events at the Yerba Buena Gardens. I've been with them a long time. Yeah. I
performed there once or twice many years ago for one of their events.
Right.
And Pi has done it for years.
That's right. Years. I just saw them recently.
It's a really good program for. There's not a lot. There is, not to blow my own horn, but there's My Circus Festival every summer at Union Square, which you've come with the
Prescott Circus,
and there's the Gardens Festival at Yerba Buena Gardens. There's not a lot of free performances for children in the Bay Area.
That's true.
Which is like,
unfortunately,
there's mine and there's there's the YGF, and there may be others, but I'd be hard pressed to name them.
Right.
Let's get into some more ticklish, sensitive matter. As a person of color, there aren't a lot of people of color in our art form.
Right.
I mean, in the Bay Area especially, I can think of Jamar,
Yeah.
Calvin.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the only people who. Oh, well, I mean, DiMarcello. Those are the only people who really jump out at me.
Yeah.
And you got like Universal Circus in Chicago.
Maybe it might be Atlanta.
Okay.
It might be Atlanta. Universal Circus.
And they've got some amazing acrobatic clowns in that show. But if you think about like the luminaries of our art form, they're almost all were white men. There isn't a spectrum like you would expect, because clown at its core, at its fundamental, is a part of every single indigenous culture in the world.
Yeah, that's
they
right.
all have a clown archetype. They all have someone who usually functions as a way of reinforcing taboo, a way of pointing out things that you're not supposed to be doing, and ridiculing you for them. But clown exists in so many indigenous cultures.
Yes,
but that's not part of Western clown, and I think that's really odd.
Yeah.
What is your feeling about this coming into this form as a person of color?
Well, being African American, what I've noticed. So back in the day, in the early 1900s, when you had African Americans wanting to perform on stage under the limits of blackface minstrelsy, performing in vaudeville, well, even vaudeville itself shifted out where producers didn't want to pay money to send equipment. Acts got smaller as producers were finding, I can make more money just booking somebody getting up there singing and dancing who doesn't have to carry all these props and things, right? And so when you think about that dynamic changing a long time ago, even through the 40s and 50s and going into television, the simplicity of that, what's become popular today in humor, especially from the African American experience, is stand-up comedy. And so it's stand-up, not fall down, comedy that speaks about life, politics, the culture. Yes, I don't know too many people of color doing the clown
really
work.
Failed in saying Tristan Cunningham, who's an amazing, outstanding performer.
That's right.
It was a huge failure on my part not to say Tristan Cunningham. She's incredible.
Yep. And so we're mentioning about 4 people of color. For me, I'm one of those, I can only speak for myself. I'm one of those that if I'm passionate about something, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to worry what other people say. I remember going to Berkeley High. What? You're a clown? And being judged by that. But because I knew how much I enjoyed it and the experience of being funny and creating laughter, I didn't worry about what people thought. But I know in our culture in this day and age, there's a lot of people who think about what will people think of me if I perform in this manner.
Well, and stand-up is about defense and aggression. Stand-up is either attacking or defending, whereas clown is about look at my vulnerability. Look, watch me fail. Laugh at me. Not laugh with me. Not laugh at someone else with me, but laugh at me, man. Come together as a group and laugh at me and let my failing make you feel stronger. And that's hard for people. I'm not saying doing stand-up is easy. It's not. But I think it's easier than doing clown.
Yeah. Well, I've seen people actually do that same thing that you just spoke about. I've seen those stand-up comics where it's all about their foibles and personal issues, and and they're able to laugh at that. Clowning, especially in American culture, is just not a popular art form.
It's not.
And if that's not popular, you're really not going to have a lot of people of color participating in something that's not that popular.
Well, you're already getting denigrated, and then to choose something that's even more...
Exactly.
But you look at someone like John Gilkey, who is, just one of the greatest living, in my eyes, one of the greatest living clowns in the world. He doesn't call what he teaches clown. Yeah. He doesn't advertise it as clown. Yeah. It's the idiot workshop. It is clown. But he's aiming it at those stand-up people. At the improv people. Right. And he's incredible, and what he teaches is incredible. But even if you look at, There's some amazing stand-ups who are totally self-deprecating. Ron Funches, do you know who he is?
No.
He's from Portland.
Okay.
And he's African American.
Yeah.
He has an autistic son, and his stuff is really, he's just such a gentle, sweet person.
Beautiful.
And one of the best stand-up comics out there right now. But even if you look at stand-up comics, they denigrate clowns, and then the closest thing we've got to what we're doing. Even people like, I was just commenting online how no one takes clowns seriously but clowns. Yeah. There's no one else out there who takes what we do seriously but us.
Right.
But you're looking at even the stand-ups who acknowledge us, like Maria Bamford or Zach Galifianakis just had a show where he was playing a clown, playing like a theatrical clown. Yeah. And even then, they still denigrate the art form.
Yeah.
They're still very negative towards it.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, it's very unfortunate, and I wonder. It makes me think because now that I have this like psychological training, where the ego's involved, and how people can be judgmental, and how how the word clowning can be denigrated and put downish, and it gets used in frames like don't be a clown, stop clowning around, and all these negative connotations. It's my hope that there will be a reemergence of clowning.
This is going to make someone who makes it hip again, but it's not going to be for like 20 or 30 years before someone makes it cool to be a clown again. Yeah. It's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's about the vulnerability. Cool doesn't care.
Right.
Cool doesn't care.
Right.
But clowns, it's all about caring.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all about caring way too much.
That's right.
It's hard for us to be cool.
Right. Yeah.
So, again, I don't want to harp on race for the whole fucking conversation, but
that's okay.
Has it affected your ability to get work? How has being an African American affected your career as a clown?
Yeah.
If it has.
That's good. Yeah, I've been on. This was some years ago where I was at an event at Stanford University in Palo Alto, California, and it was an event for African Americans. Where do we go from here in the 21st century? And I was on the panel, and I performed. I was introduced as, probably back then it was probably Derique the Clown or something. And in my character, I always wear a tuxedo, polka dot tie, round glasses with no lens. And I did my 15-minute presentation doing funny stuff with Hambone. People are laughing in all the right places. But it was my community who were African American intellectuals, educators from around the country, had a hard time with me identifying as a clown because of what their perceived concept of what clowns are, which is most likely associated with buffoonery, and that it's not about uplifting culture. It's about it came from, because of blackface minstrelsy, it was about dehumanizing culture. And I was in this dialogue with the audience wanted to say, you shouldn't be called a clown. What you do, that's not clowning. And from my perspective, it was clowning because it had all the spices to the recipe. The costume, things too big, things going wrong, me finding a clever way to deal with it, not talking, fully embodied, creating something, buffoonery, but without makeup, and they did not want to associate that with clowning. And so I think what we're talking about is, depending on a person's consciousness of what they're associating labels to, informs their belief system at its deep core. That's what I think.
That makes sense.
But let me say one more thing to answer more of your question. How has it affected my career? I don't know how much being African American has affected. To some degree, probably.
I think being in the Bay helps, probably.
It does. I can only think of one experience where I had a negative experience where I was working with an agent who wanted to be my manager, and she got me on the Arsenio Hall show. But before we taped the program, she wanted to be my manager. She had this like crazy contract where if my name ever became a household name, she owned like a big percentage of that, and I wouldn't agree to it. Long story short, we do the Arsenio Hall show, and we come back to renegotiating how we were going to work together. I had to get a lawyer to negotiate the contract, and I'm spending a couple $1,000s trying to figure that out. Turned out we couldn't work together. Next thing you know, all these events and gigs that were cruise ships, variety show tours in New Jersey got canceled. And so in a way I was blackballed because I didn't agree to the contract. And now, did that have something to do with my color? Also, I don't know, but I just know that I've had some problems due to my ethics and my belief system, and like I'm not going to just sell out to try and get some fast money and maybe big money that hers is way bigger than mine, you know.
And when you don't know, you gotta assume that it might be. You gotta assume that might be part of the problem.
It might have been.
Let's talk about some happier stuff.
Okay.
The media that influenced the clown that you became. TV shows, movies, plays, books, music, all of it. What is the media that influenced...
Yeah.
Actually, no. I want to get to that question. Before we get to that question, how did Lance McGee become Derique McGee?
My middle name is Derek. When I was in the Pickle Family Circus, I'm getting into show business now, and I'm a performer. I'm getting paid a little bit. I felt like I needed a different name that rang a bell. So I took Derek, and because of my taking French classes in middle school and high school, I had this like European fantasy like Derique, the performer. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. It sounds cool. And so I took my middle name and took Derek and changed it to Derique. That became my name. That became the name that I used in the business. And then over the years, I added the unique Derique in front of it, and that stuck. So I have two identities. When I'm performing, and people that know me in the community as Derique, they call me Derique, and people that know me as Lance wherever I am, and if I'm not performing, or as a wellness consultant, mindfulness consultant, they call me Lance. So I have these two identities as one.
Well, you're definitely Greek to me. Okay, now back to the influences. What is the media that influenced the clown that you became?
Oh man, when I was in my early 20s, watching Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and I was watching Fred Astaire because I like that classiness. I loved all the old black and white films. I love that, especially with the tuxedo stuff, and the Nicholas brothers. They were of that era too, and Sammy Davis Jr. And I read Sammy Davis Jr.'s biography, so I was influenced by a lot of the greats that came out of that period of vaudeville. And of course, Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton were big, masters of clowns and creating gags and slapstick and playing everyday nuances and that people could relate to. I was like, oh my god, that is so cool. And then also Burt Williams, who was an African-American blackface minstrel in the early 1900s. He lived here in San Francisco. So when I was going to New College of California here in San Francisco, I did research on Burt Williams and learned a lot about him. So he became one of my new inspirations, because the fact that he had to perform in the degrading mask of blackface, but he was the highest paid African-American entertainer and first African-American entertainer to perform on Broadway in the Ziegfeld Follies with, who was that guy? Yeah, that with the big top hat.
W.C. Fields.
W.C. Fields, yeah. He was working with people like W.C. Fields. W.C. Fields actually said a quote of Burt Williams. And keep in mind, Burt Williams only performed in blackface because they wouldn't hire him if he did, and he was brilliant. W.C. Fields... No, I might be getting... Maybe it was Eddie Cantor that said this. One of them... I'm forgetting now, jeez. One of them said... No, it was Eddie Cantor. Burt Williams is the funniest man I ever saw and the saddest man I ever knew.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and... Burt Williams and Walker, two blackface minstrels performing down on Market Street when they had vaudeville. They would street perform. And so I'm inspired by Burt Williams because I wanted to show the world that African American culture can be funny on stage that does not dehumanize the culture. So I was on this mission to back then I used to I'm going to be famous. I'm going to show the world. I remember telling my mother, someday I'm going to New York. I'm going to perform on Broadway like Bill Irwin, And so those were some of the performers, and it was that medium that really engaged me. Today, when watching, I don't really watch much of television. The sitcoms, they just don't do it for me. I don't get to see the beauty of slapstick much so I'm not really watching, and I couldn't really say if there was somebody of our culture in this period, especially a person of color, that I would go oh yeah, I love that. I just don't see it.
Well, you mentioned Burt Williams, and that's a big one. What is a piece of media of any kind that you think is underrated and people should be paying more attention to, the clowns should be looking at and drawing inspiration from? Something that they don't give enough attention to.
Yeah. That's a great question. So it makes me think. I'll have to speak for myself. Where am I in my consciousness as an individual artist who has something to say, and what am I going to say on stage through clown? So I created a show called Foolala, Over the Rainbow. I created that show to talk a little bit about rainbows have no separation. They travel together. They're beautiful colors. How am I going to metaphorically speak to that as a clown on stage, conveying how rainbows, that there is no dividedness, there is no separation? Things that have happened in this last year in our country with separateness and hate, I've been watching that. And as I started creating a show, I wanted to speak to it in subtle ways. And so I'm creating a message through a media or a medium that in a theater that brings people together. So I'm creating clown acts that speak to about togetherness, that how we're connected in a way like a rainbow that travels together. You can't separate, to create a beautiful image, no matter what your color. Laughing together, exploring together, improvising together is that rainbow in some way. And so I'm trying to convey that in a performance. I'm saying that to answer your question because I can only speak how am I using where I'm at in my consciousness, what I'm seeing in the world, taking that in and now projecting something back out through my lens of how I see things and how I want to play it as a humorist on stage. I think we all, on some level, there's different types of clowning. Are we doing just pure slapstick knockabout? Are we getting up on stage and doing a full narrative with a beginning, middle, and end and making a commentary like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton did? Does one have the budget to actually explore and invest in that? Is the community going to really support that type of work and perspective? Is it easier to survive just going I got these skills and let me just get the gig and do a 20-minute thing, as opposed to back then when people could really, it didn't cost a whole lot to put together a story? So I'm saying a lot that it depends on your resources, your consciousness of what you're bringing to the stage, to the experience, that informs what the material, what you're going to talk about, what you're going to imply, what you're going to convey or purposefully do in a routine. Now, are you doing it through messages? If you're a silent clown, how are you conveying that? Are you using multimedia to have words, establish something, to set up something? So I think it just depends on the individual, how you're going to use media to project a story. Because I don't see a lot of clowns coming on stage with a full narrative. Yeah. we all got acts and bits and gags, and maybe there'll be a little commentary in an act, but the full story, that's something we don't see very much. And when I do my show Foo La La, through circus inspired, I'm trying to integrate a story that's inspired by circus and clowning and in subtle ways. I hope I answered that question.
So, talking about Foo La La,
yeah.
How long have you been building this show?
This is my 4th year doing Foo La La, and every year I change the story, and I try and find new ways where I push myself, perform Hambone body percussion in a different way, juggle in a different way, do my acrobatics and clowning in a different way, find some new gags. It's a way to kind of keep me fresh and find new material. So I use a lot of multimedia. In this show, this year, I decided to create an opening video for my show, and I say that I'm my own opening act. And this year's video is called The 5 Foo La Las, featuring my grandmother, my mother, me, my daughter, and my granddaughter. And we just shot the footage last week, and it's all going to be coming together in the next couple of weeks, and that will be the opening to my show. Last year, my video was a dedication to my grandfather, who had just passed away that year, who was a famous songwriter, tap dancer by the name of Jack Hammer, who co-wrote Great Balls of Fire.
Oh, wow.
And when he passed away, I felt compelled to do a tribute video to him. And in the video, I'm juggling balls of fire. So I created that in tribute to him, and as a way to perform my shows, where I actually start off with an opening video of me doing something and then tying it into the show.
And the show is a one-man show, yeah? I mean, it is, and the Marsh is all single-person shows.
Yes, right? Solo performances, yeah.
When does it start?
My show, Foo La La Over the Rainbow, will open December 20th, 2017, and it'll run through January 7th, 2018. And it's a family show. It's something for everybody. I always think about, when I'm writing my show, I'm trying to think of material that's going to grab adults and kids and bring those together. So there might be some material in there that the kids have no reference to, but I try and get something on all different levels for everybody. A lot of times adults will say to me, "Oh my God, I think I enjoyed that more than my kids," but they have this expectation, like, clowns, it's gonna be a kiddie show, but yeah, Foo La La gives me a chance to tell a story. Calvin Kaiku is directing this show, so it's great for me to have that outside eye and help me create my vision. And so we've been co-writing the show together, and I really enjoy working with him. And it's the 4th year that I get this opportunity. And like I said, if I have the energy to do it, because a one-man show for a full hour, and I do a 20-minute workshop after. If the audience sticks around, you're gonna learn. We'll practice some Hambone, and I'll bring out some juggling scarves and teach people basically how to juggle scarves. And that's the other thing that I like to do. Whatever I know how to do, I like to teach it and share it. So I feel like I'm kind of an edutainer in a way. Yeah. Okay,
one last question. Actually, 2 last questions, but I already know the answer to one of them. If people wanted to find your work online,
okay,
where would they go?
Yeah.
Or find you?
Yeah. I can be found on Facebook. I'm redoing my website, so that's down right now. But Unique Derique, Facebook Unique Derique. You can find me, follow me there. And then if you go to themarsh.org, you can find out more information also, in addition to about the shows that I'll be doing. But my website, soon to come.
And lastly, if you could tag 3 other clowns to be on the podcast after you, who would they be?
Oh, wow. Well, definitely thinking about Calvin, because he's doing some great work. Calvin Kaiku, I don't know if you've had him on. Tristan Cunningham for sure. And then let's see. That's 2. It would be good to do one, if you could, with Jamar.
That'd be so great.
Yeah, I know he's in Atlanta.
We've done a few of these on Skype, but they just don't work as well. It's hard to hear what's going on.
Yeah,
Jamar.
But that's with the third person.
Right.
Yeah.
Derique, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today on Ridiculous Life of a Clown. This program, as always, is made possible by your support through our Patreon, which you can find through www.picklewater.com. Also, please join us this coming January 27th, 2018 at 7 p.m. at Stageworks Theater in San Francisco for a huge circus gala featuring clowns, comedians, and burlesque dancers, all in benefit of Planned Parenthood. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.